me. I've opened up my heart. I'm at the start. I save the world. I save the world.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. A special shout out and thank you for those of you now watching the prepared video on one of our many video platforms. We post all of my videos on YouTube, but also on BitChute and also on Rumble. So please make sure you subscribe to whatever platform it is that you are watching this on. This is Reverend Tony. I am the miracle minister with the priest collar. Yes, I wear a priest collar. A bold move. That's what I'm going to talk about today. Bold moves. Sometimes bold moves or bold positions or bold behavior is called for as we follow the teaching of A Course in Miracles. And this can put us directly in conflict with some people or some aspects of society. And because of that, some people are hesitant. And I understand. But if we follow the Holy Spirit's guidance, we have to trust in that guidance. And we are told to take Jesus as a model for learning. And what I know about Jesus's life is that he took very bold moves. And it put him directly in conflict with all kinds of people in all kinds of segments of society. All throughout my ministry, my running the Community Miracle Center, and the years I was actually involved with ministry before that, I took some very bold moves and some very bold stands. And they were frequently met with resistance or out and out conflict. I took a bold stand 25, 30 years ago on non-monogamy, polyamory. I was getting that message for myself, and I was also seeing how it seemed to be substantiated in some of the teachings of A Course in Miracles. And I talked about that from time to time. I used to talk about it more than I do now. Maybe it's not as much of a personal issue anymore. Of course, the last time I did talk about it, just mentioned that I was non-monogamous about a year ago. We lost 2 members. So they couldn't support a church whose minister was non-monogamous. Okay, so be it. I took a bold stand about not taking the COVID vaccine. Again, many people didn't particularly like that stand. I talked about it. I talked about how I felt guided and what I felt the teachings of A Course in Miracles said to support that for me. I took a bold stand when I left the emergency room in January of 2022 after I had been told by 2 doctors that I would most likely die, and I would certainly die if I left, that I needed to check into the hospital immediately, and my guidance was no, and I left. I think about with the COVID vaccine, which I did not take, I got so kind of frustrated and annoyed with having to explain why to people who didn't have an open mind. Eventually, I just settled with, because God told me not to. That would at least stop people from arguing with me. So, Course says that we just have to follow the Holy Spirit. Some people say it's all about the mind, that it really doesn't have anything to do with behavior. But there was that wonderful passage that Reverend Paula read in that section from the manual, Are Changes Required in the Life Situations of God Teachers? It says, changes are required in the minds of God's teachers. This may or may not involve changes in the external situation. There are those who are called upon to change their life situation almost immediately, but these are generally special cases. So changes in your life situation may or may not be called for, but they may. A lot of people like to focus in how they may not, and we can't really or shouldn't really expect to get guidance about specific life things. It's all about a change of mind. Yes, it is all about a change of mind, but those changes of mind may and may not, but they may involve changes in our life situations, and they certainly have with me. Each year around this time of year, as we go by August 16th, which we did a couple days ago, I am reminded of a particular event in my life. It's when I moved to San Francisco, and it gives me a moment to pause and a moment to reflect. So I moved to San Francisco on August 16th, 1979, which, if I do my math right, that's 45 years ago. So 45 years ago, a couple days ago, I, traveling alone with two suitcases and a backpack, managed to get myself on a plane at JFK International Airport and flew to San Francisco. I realize I'm now a little fuzzy about the details of that trip, so I'm going to stick to only the details that I feel 100% sure on. Um, so I did fly out of JFK. I remember that. And I remember that it was my first commercial airline trip. I had never been on a commercial airline before. I had been planning the trip for about 8 months, and it was a it was one of the first times I can say that I received very definite life guidance from spirit to change my life in a fairly bold or maybe even drastic fashion. I had become quite interested in spirituality. I was studying many alternative forms of spirituality. I was continually turning my life over to spiritual guidance. I didn't really conceptualize it as Holy Spirit at the time. The Course was not in my life at that time, but I was, and I did feel guided, and I was guided in the winter of 1978 and then 1979 to move from Ithaca, New York, and to move to San Francisco. And it was a bold move, and everybody close to me thought I was kind of nuts. Again, I had never been a traveler. I'd never visited here. So it was, I can give you a lot of details about, why, but I don't have that kind of time. But there were reasons, and the main reason was, of course, that I had gotten the guidance to do it. So I made the plans and I got on the plane. As I said, it was my first commercial airline trip. I had been planning it for about 8 months. It takes time to dismantle your life. I had a pretty comfortable life in Ithaca, New York. And to dismantle your life and liquidate all your possessions, which also meant my car, a van actually I had at the time. I had a dog. I had to find somebody to take the dog. All of that stuff takes a certain amount of time. So I had given myself 8 months to do it. There were certain reasons why I chose the date. Again, I'm not going to go into all the details. And I flew out to San Francisco in that very first airline trip that I'd ever taken. And we couldn't land in San Francisco. I remember this. This I remember for sure because it was too foggy. And so we had to land in Oakland, California, which is on the other side of the bay. But we couldn't deplane in Oakland. We just had to stay on the plane and wait for the fog to clear. And eventually, after an hour or more, I don't remember exactly how long, it was a while, the fog did clear, and we hopped across the bay, went from the Oakland airport to the San Francisco airport, probably the shortest commercial airline flight in history. It's only got to be a couple of miles, 2 or 3 miles, I think. And we finally touched down in San Francisco. And then I had to find my way late at night from the San Francisco airport to downtown San Francisco, which is a shuttle. I took a shuttle. And by the time I arrived in downtown San Francisco, it was after midnight. So it wasn't August 16th anymore. It was August 17th. And in those days, when you arrived in downtown San Francisco, it plopped you right in what's called the Tenderloin district, which is not a very nice district. It's not the best district in San Francisco. And I always remember, I tell this story on and off, that there I am, a little nervous but excited, with two suitcases and a backpack. A little after midnight, early morning hours of August 17th, 1979. And my first conversation with a native San Franciscan, was a tall African American black man dressed rather nicely, who had this box, and he wanted to sell me what was in the box. And when he opened the box, it was a pair of white ladies' spike high heel shoes. And I had a short engagement conversation with him. Like, why would I want to buy a pair of white high heel shoes? And he told me that it would be for my woman, of course. So I just like that story because it just let me know that San Francisco was going to be a strange trip. It was to be that was my first conversation with somebody, with a San Franciscan, was somebody trying to get me to buy a pair of ladies' white spike high heel shoes. I did not buy the shoes. I had to make my way to public transportation, which I had researched. But it was late at night, and the public transportation is different late at night. I intended to get here about 7 in the evening, but now it was after midnight. I had arranged a place to stay with a friend of a friend who I had never met. I think I'd had 2 short conversations with her on the phone. I called her from the San Francisco airport when we finally landed. Couldn't call her before then. Remember, this is the day before cell phones. We actually had to have a phone. So I called her and told her that I was still coming, but that I was late. And she said she was going to bed, but that she would leave the light on in the porch, the door unlocked, and just come in. I had the address, and she would leave the light in the bedroom I was going to stay in on. I thought this was pretty trusting and unusual for somebody to leave their door unlocked in San Francisco. But I made it there probably about 1 in the morning. I did find my way in public transportation. It was a little nerve-wracking, but I found it, and I found the house, and the light was on just like she said, and the door was unlocked just like she said. And I was very happy to get into that room and very excited to be finally in San Francisco. I had no job. I had no place to live. I could only stay there for a couple of days. My total life savings was about $2,000, and I had that as a cashier's check that I would need to deposit in a bank. That was a mistake because depositing the cashier's check in the bank meant that I didn't have access to the cash for about 4 or 5 days, and I kind of needed the cash. So all I really had with me was, maybe $150, $200 in my wallet. Of course, that was a long time ago. That went a little further. But that's how I landed in San Francisco. As I said, it was a bold move, but I was following my guidance. And Course in Miracles says, in everything be led by him and do not reconsider. Trust him to answer quickly, surely, and with love for everyone who will be touched in any way by the decision, and everyone will be. So I was being led. And I was probably very unprepared for life in San Francisco. It was difficult for me to find an apartment, or looking for a room, an apartment. I didn't realize how difficult that would be for somebody brand new in a city. People don't want to rent to you if you're brand new in the city because they feel you're not stable enough. I didn't realize that. I didn't know that. It was very difficult to find a job. I was in the restaurant industry. I'd been in the restaurant industry for years. I thought with my experience, it would be fairly easy to find a job with all the restaurants in San Francisco, but no, same thing again. You're new in the city. But I persevered. My first apartment was not really a very good apartment. My roommates were really marginal. My first job was really kind of a horrible job, but I needed to have a job because I didn't have that much money. So, I mean, I took the not so very good apartment and I took the terrible job. and began my life in San Francisco. The hardest thing wasn't the apartment, the job. The hardest thing was that I found it way more difficult to make friends than I had anticipated. I was coming out of a really close-knit social community in Ithaca, New York. I was used to a lot of friends. And suddenly I found myself in San Francisco a little bit lonely. I was lonely. And I didn't really understand the urban, especially the San Francisco way of life. I felt like a little fish out of water. And I do remember really looking forward to calling home. But remember, in those days before cell phones, uh, calling long distance was an expense. And it cost a fair amount of money, and it was more money than I really had. So I couldn't call and make long conversations home. I remember timing the calls like 3 to 5 minutes was I felt all that I could afford, and only like once every other week or something like that. I might have moved back to Ithaca, New York. I didn't have enough money to move. I kind of spent all my money getting here and then renting an apartment and getting furniture and setting up the apartment. So I wasn't really broke, but I didn't have any spare money. Uh, and there was a great resistance. I just found a lot of resistance, and I didn't particularly like it here for my first couple of years. Sometimes these bold stances that you take, they don't get met quickly with a lot of acceptance and happiness. Sometimes there's a lot of resistance. As I said, I lost 2 members a year ago when I mentioned that I was non-monogamous and bisexual. I lost members when I didn't promote the vaccine, when I was against the COVID vaccine. Um, I didn't lose any members when I didn't check into the hospital in 2022 when I had COVID, and I did actually get a fair amount of support. I really want to thank Reverend Deuce Althea, Reverend Peter, Reverend Rudy, who were really a wonderful support to me when I was ill with COVID in January of 2022, after they told me I was going to die. I didn't die. In fact, within 3 days, I was getting better. I didn't have a whole lot of resistance from people about that one. Remember, that was a little late in the pandemic, 2022. And by then, people had begun to realize that maybe being in the hospital wasn't necessarily the greatest place for you to be if you had COVID, that a lot of people would weather it and heal without that. So I'm really grateful by that. Course in Miracles says, "In everything be led by him and do not reconsider. Trust him to answer quickly, surely, and with love for everyone who will be touched in any way by the decision, and everyone will be." So with all those big decisions, moving here, my lifestyle choices, not getting the vaccine, not checking into the hospital, I always felt this is what God wanted me to do. And once I got that guidance clear, I never wavered and I never reconsidered. I just toughed it out. And sometimes it was a little tough. The Course says that we are actually here for very bold things, big things. We're here to save the world. I mean, that's a pretty big thing. It's kind of an awesome task. It's kind of terrible at the same time. Um, it's so seemingly overwhelming. It's so much responsibility. I mean, at times we're all probably saying, Jesus, are you kidding here? What are you talking about? Me save the world? I'm not going to save the world. Course tells us, accept the plan you did not make instead. Judge not your value to it. If God's voice assures you that salvation needs your part and that the whole depends on you, be sure that it is so. So when we follow these bold guidances, sometimes we have to just accept things. And the guidance to save the world is bold. And we need to be assured and we need to be confident that Jesus isn't making a mistake. When he assigns the salvation of the world to us, it's not a mistake. And we need to not waver, and we need to not reconsider, and we need to really embrace it. I have found that A Course in Miracles students actually try to blunt what it means when the Course says that the salvation of the world depends on me. A lot of Course in Miracles students immediately launch into what they believe that actually means. Like, it doesn't really mean what the words say. Those are 6 little words. Salvation of the world depends on me. But people will say, well, it's not really the world we're saving, it's our perception of the world. The people will launch into this description, which basically is, it doesn't really mean what you think it means. It doesn't really mean what it says. And I think we should spend a little time just taking it in and letting it mean what the words say. Salvation also means healing. So salvation of the world depends on me would also mean the healing of the world depends on me. So a first question to kind of ask myself, maybe you can ask yourself this: do I want to save the world? Do I want to heal the world? And my answer to that question is yes. Of course I want to heal the world. Of course I want to end suffering. Of course I want to end pain. Of course I want to end lack. Not just for me, but for everybody, for the world. Of course I do. And I'm not afraid to make such a bold statement. And I don't have to define it in any other way. Of course I want to alleviate all the suffering and all the pain in the world. And A Course in Miracles in Jesus is telling me that I have the power to do that. So before I explain that away, I want to choose it. I think about why people want to spend so much time trying to explain that away. They'll say there is no world. Of course, says there is no world. So there really is nothing to save. There is nothing to heal. And I understand that. And what I know about that is that's just level confusion. Yes, at a highest level, there is no world. It's all in our minds. But at the level of our involvement with our own lives, we think we're in a world. And in that world that we think we are in, there appears to be pain and suffering. So while in that experience, do you want to save yourself and others from that pain and suffering? And to engage in some kind of level confusion, trying to explain that away, is just some sort of avoidance. It's just some sort of avoidance of the guidance. And I'm not going to participate in that avoidance. If I could save the world, why would I not want to? Why would people not want to really save the world? Well, they might think it's just too much work. Okay, so there's that. And they might just think that it's too hard. But I don't really think these are the reasons why people don't truly embrace it or why they try to explain it away. I really think the reason why people don't really embrace saving the world in a literal sense is because they're afraid they're going to fail. They're afraid they're not going to be able to do it. And they're afraid that after dedicating themselves to doing it and then not doing it, they will be depressed. It's really just fear of failure. And I could have failed about a lot of things that I've done in my life. And in fact, at times it probably felt like I was failing. I mean, my move to San Francisco could have failed. It felt a little bit like a failure for almost 2 years after I did it. Choosing a non-monogamous lifestyle could have been a failure for me, could have left me lonely and unhappy. It hasn't been, but there have been times when other people trying to convince me that it was a bad thing or an incorrect way to view life and people and relationships. Not getting vaccinated for COVID-19, that could have been a failure. People tried to convince me that it was the wrong thing to do. Not checking into the hospital in January of 2022. That was a bold move, but that could have failed. I could have died. 2 doctors tried to convince me that I would die if I didn't check into the hospital. But in everything, be led by him and don't reconsider. And so I followed my guidance. We could fail, I guess, when we accept the function of saving the world and healing the world. But I'm going to follow the guidance, because following guidance has always worked out for me in the long run. And why would I abandon that now? Because I'm afraid I'm going to fail? The Course says we do not doubt our adequacy for the function he will offer us. We will be certain only that he knows our strength, our wisdom, and our holiness. And if he deems us worthy, so we are. If we have been given the function of saving the world, healing the world, then Jesus and the Holy Spirit and God must feel that we can do it. And they must feel that we are worthy. So we are adequate. We have the strength. We have the wisdom. We have the holiness. We are worthy of this task of saving and healing the world. We will save and heal the world. No, it probably won't be easy. And yes, there may be times when we feel like we're failing. But please stop telling yourself that the Course doesn't say that that's what the job is. We are here for the salvation of the world. A Course in Miracles is not written in code. It's written in English. The English words mean what the English words say. I came for the salvation of the world means I came for the salvation of the world. It doesn't have another meaning. It means just that. And yes, it's a bold occupation. World's salvation, world's healing, being the guiding force in our lives. Yeah, it's bold. It's awesome. And it's pretty terrible at times. But it's also a wonderful energy to rest in, to live in. It's a powerful stand to take. And it will give tremendous meaning to your life. And you can sit in that power and in that energy and relish in it and truly enjoy it. And that's what I invite you to do. That's my talk for today. Thank you very much.
Woke up my eyes to see. Woke up my head to beat. Woke up my heart to be free. Woke up our world, you and me. I've opened up my heart. I'm at the start. I save the world. I save the world. I save the world. I save the world.